Hey everybody, thank you for joining us here on the very first episode of Chisme and Shadows, a podcast that is gonna break the internet. It is not, but that's totally fine. I'm okay with that. I really just want a safe area to talk about literally anything I want, and my perspective into things. I have a lot of conflicting thoughts on a lot of different things going on in our society. Today, we're actually going to be talking about just a couple of things just to start out. And to begin with, you should be new to the podcast unless you're watching this after you had already watched future episodes, in which case, wow, amazing, time traveler. But chances are a lot of you probably just haven't. This is probably the first episode for a lot of you. So, again, I said this in the teaser I did for this podcast, but I'll happily explain it again. What is Chisme and Shadows? Well, this is a podcast that's going to be about having a nice, casual conversation about the things I'm interested in at the time. And maybe it's stuff that has to do with what's considered drama around the internet or actual serious conversations about politics, the economy, world politics, everything. And for that, we're going to need to understand exactly what the two parts or the two words in the title really are. Chisme. Chisme is just a very common phrase used amongst the Hispanic community. And it usually does mean starting to, gossip about things. But in reality, Chisme could be so much bigger than that. It could literally just be getting into the conversation about what's on your mind. And that's the way I'm treating it. And then Shadows. The reason I chose Shadows is actually it's pretty simple. Shadows, first of all, is just it's a cool word to use in a title for a podcast, I feel like. But also, it kind of goes to show exactly the realm of things. We're going to be diving into some topics that at its core are pretty dark and serious, but we're going to be going amongst them in the shadows. Um, I wouldn't look too much into it. I just thought it was really cool. And it kind of makes sense because we're dealing with dark topics, I guess. I feel like this is going to be a very unique, interesting podcast. And let me tell you a little bit about myself, especially if you just don't know who I am. And that probably is more than likely because why would you? I do run an up and coming YouTube channel, which somewhere, somehow, I will put in. But because this podcast is in a way unrelated to that, that is at the moment much more of a gaming channel. There's another channel in the works right now that is going to be more of a vlogging channel. Those two things are unrelated to this podcast. This podcast will be uploaded to a brand new YouTube channel I'm starting specifically just for this podcast. So it's also possible you're watching me there, in which case, hello. But if you're watching or if you are listening to this in pure audio form, then I will say I'm with you there. I have always been a straight audio podcast listener for most of my podcast listening time until recently, and then I started really getting into watching podcasts, which is a whole different interesting thing. Here's what I find kind of interesting about that, and I was just talking about this earlier today, and that's even though nowadays I do prefer having the visuals with the podcast itself. For the most part, I actually don't even really look at the actual video. I'll put on a podcast on YouTube, maybe watch a minute, and then put it to the side while I multitask on other things. And it's so weird because if you ask me, even though I watch 3 to 4 minutes of an hour long podcast, like actually on the video, if you ask me if I would rather listen to it audio, I would say no. I would just be I am now like an avid video watcher as well, which is why this is not just a normal audio based podcast. Even though, to be honest, it would have made my life a lot easier. And now the thing to know about podcasts is they require a lot more work than you'd think. Setting up a space like this, it, it's very much an illusion to the audience. And I say like this, so if you're listening on pure audio, just understand that in visually I appear to be sitting down in what could be a couch, and there is what could be a stereo, or if you just know your tech, then it's a record player that's has a few extra options on it. But and it may just seem like I turned on the lights and I sat down and just started recording, and it's all good in that. But in reality, this is actually a setup that took a lot more time and effort and trial and error. When I had recorded the teaser for this podcast, I had spent probably 4 to 5 hours setting things up. Um, I have with me that's not noticeable unless I actually, and I might do a BTS if you know what that means, on this, but essentially I have two studio lights, one right here and one right there. It isn't crazy, professional or whatever, but it was a little bit, a little bit for require a little money, but um, but luckily all the other equipment I've already had because of the YouTube channel. These two studio lights I felt like were crucial in really creating the lighting atmosphere. They didn't have to be too crazy in terms of like price, I'm not gonna lie. But I needed something that had the professional qualities to them. So, and I could definitely go into it another day, the details, but let's move on. And then obviously, this mic setup is not my normal mic setup. This Shure microphone is one of the most recommended. It is a bit on the pricey side, and it does have a preamp in there, which does increase the price as well. There's a version of this without it. It would make it cheaper, but then you need to get a whole audio interface. It's a bit complicated, but I already had it because of my YouTube channel. So, of course, but I'm not in my YouTube recording setup right now. And thus, I had to move that and set it up in a way where it's like nice and comfortable for me here in the podcast seat is what I'm calling it for now. And then to set up my camera, you would think it was just put it on a tripod. If only it was that simple. Setting up the tripod required a lot of extra things, including like what level do you want it? Which I know this gets kind of iffy because obviously I have the luxury of having a few options, but then choosing which tripod was also a thing. And then, lastly, and this one was more important for this type of video, and that is I had to really, really, truly start to understand a lot more about my camera and the and how to tweak things on there to create a more visually appealing uh, recording. Because when you are doing video recordings for YouTube, especially for a gameplay or a gaming channel, to an extent, you could definitely get away with just setting your camera to automatic, let it handle the ISO, shutter speed, the white balance, everything. You could just let it do its thing. It'll handle everything for the most part. And that is the way I would do it because it is simple and there's already other different things to have, that goes into that, so I don't mess with it. But when it came to this, I really wanted to give a certain atmosphere. And in fact, if you are watching this, perhaps on YouTube, that is probably going to be the number one thing that is likely to change, and that is the way the visuals look. Because even though I do really like what I got going here, I know it can be improved. I just know it, and it will. But now it becomes one of those things where you really have to be careful the variables you change because you could completely ruin the hard work, all the painstaking tweaks you did to get it to where it is right now. And then lastly, another crucial important part was actually the audio recording method, I suppose. Because I do have my camera here and the camera is capable of recording audio. You're not going to get the best quality for audio through the camera. It's just not going to be a thing. And thus, obviously, I have a mic here. This mic is not connected to my camera. That's just not the route I took. This is higher end, bigger mic. And like I said earlier, if you're listening to pure audio, this is just a Shure microphone. If you don't know what that is, just understand it is. It's a bit on the bigger side, and and this just doesn't plug into the camera. And to talk about a little bit about how this podcast is going to be structured, it's going to probably change especially within the first couple of episodes, because I'll come to realize some parts that might not be as entertaining or as useful, and then maybe some segments need to be changed around. And I would really like to start it off probably with a not a serious topic, followed up by something I'm more interested and more serious about. And then I want to end the podcast with a AITA. And if you are an active Reddit user, you would know what that acronym stands for. But if you don't, it stands for Am I the Asshole? It is basically a Reddit where people will post certain situations they're in which they want the opinion of the readers on whether in that situation they would be considered an asshole for the thing that they did. It's actually very entertaining, and I often get into some very mind boggling conflictions in my mind on what to do. And I always feel like I go against the norm. And yeah, because of that, I think that'd be really fun to end it on that note. And of course, that's why that's going to be for the end. Now, I think it would be okay, or it would be fun to slightly talk about a huge reason why I feel like somebody like me should make a podcast and be able to talk to at least as many people as I can. And I will explain this with a very fun, lighthearted story that should be taken as very fun and lighthearted, because this is not even the serious section of the podcast. So, let's describe a scene. Here's the scene. I have a buddy of mine at work. He, for a couple of weeks into December, had been rehearsing for this what at the time I didn't really know what it would be called, but a play is probably the thing I would say. I thought it was a play, some type of theater experience. And he said it was for church. Okay, like cool. And he had been rehearsing at this point for weeks, and lightheartedly, I was like, "Hey, buddy, uh, should I'd love to go when you invite me." And great guy, he did invite me, and I sincerely did want to go because that'd be fun. And in fact, I thought it would be fun to get a couple of the other guys from work to go as well, to go support a friend of ours. And I thought it would be a fun experience. He had said there was going to be food, and yeah, it was going to be an afternoon, this nice social event. And some background on this. Well, to understand, or to put it simply, I have not been to a religious church since I was a little kid. So, in fact, of course, I didn't really understand etiquette or anything, so I was pretty nervous. So, having a couple of friends go with me would definitely help me out as well. But, of course, the day came, told my bud, hey, go ahead and send me the address. Yeah, I'm serious. I'm gonna go. And last minute, I invited the guys because, of course, I don't know how it turned out that way, but just did. And one of them could make it. So even having one other person, I think, would be great. So we had decided to go. And some background on this friend of mine, he's a good buddy of mine. I'm not going to call him out on the podcast because I'm not even sure if he would want to be on this podcast or be mentioned. So thus, I'm just going to call him Brady. Brady. Yeah, he seems like a Brady. Nice friend of mine. He is a white male. With that said, let's continue on. We decided to carpool, so a buddy picks me up and we head there. Get to the parking lot. Church is absolutely filled. Parking spots, taken up. At this point, I don't even know where the heck we're gonna park, but fine. We spent a couple of time just browsing. We just did a couple circlings around the church, hoping to find a spot. As we do for background text as well, the buddy of mine who was doing this event, he is Samoan. That's what I will say. He is Samoan male, and it's a church that he himself has said has a lot of Samoans that go there. Okay, so we're circling around trying to find a spot. We eventually find one. I'm nervous to go in because I, here's the thing. We pull up to the church, and I actually didn't even know this was happening at the church. I understood this was a church event, but considering it was at nighttime and considering I thought it was like a play or this theater experience, I would have thought it would be in like a small theater, like for the play. And so I'm extra nervous because, like I had mentioned earlier, I just haven't been to a church in forever. So we're sitting in the car. A buddy of mine is at this point. He's just like, he's dealing with my nonsense, which is like my illogical nervousness for going into this place. I just didn't understand what I would do once I was in. Okay, so we're just watching people get out of their cars, and we're constantly, going in, and that's when my buddy, and I remember it to this day, and I will forever tease him because I just thought it was hilarious. He looked at me, and he asked a question as serious as can be. The question was, "Do you think we're gonna be the only white guys here?" In a very serious tone, he looks at me and groups me together with him as being the white guys. The white guys. The reason this is so funny is actually just because never in my life. I never thought it would be. But in a lot of ways, this actually makes a lot of sense. Obviously, at the time, it's just one of those things that he's probably just actually, just a blanking of the mind, or just like, who knows. But obviously there was not much behind it, likely. But that makes me think about me as an individual, and how I present myself, and how in my group of friends I've had, and not just my buddy here, but even in the past, some of my like Hispanic friends have kind of judged a lot. They've judged me on how I speak. They've judged me in their preconceptions of how I should speak or something, because I I have been told that I speak white. That has been a thing that has been said to me, and the way I always took that was very much a, wow, you speak how I think white people speak, and I think white people speak really smart. I think you speak smart, which means I equate that to speaking white. And honestly, I never had much pushback. It always boggled me a little bit and had in the back of my head. And because my best, or one of my bestest buddies was white, and I spent many years getting used to talking to him, although I always felt like it was the other way around. It could be like I ended up get starting to speak like him. I don't know, but really, I always felt like there needs to be a lot more people like me. Not not people that speak smart, or not people that you would consider that speak white, but maybe people that could be seen as bridges from people who may think we speak white. And from the other example I was giving, from people who may actually be able to resonate, or might be able to reach, especially young white males. The demographic that, in my opinion, holds a lot of importance in the next couple of years political environment. And of course, I don't really want to get too political at all times because politics does something to people. It just does. For a lot of people, it kind of makes them start to feel uncomfortable. Uh, it makes them be on guard on what the person is saying. Am I gonna say something that goes against their views, their morals? Will I say something that aligns with what they think, with their views? And whatever I end up saying, depending on that, will make them not want to listen anymore. As sad as it may be. And that's the thing. I will be talking politics on this. I have made it a thing where I will be. As much controversy as that can do, or as much arguing as I may cause. The truth of the matter is, though, before I talk any of that, there has to be some sort of understanding or some sort of ground we're all standing on for you to be able to trust me whether or not you agree with me. Because that's the big issue here. A lot of podcasters have their views, whether or not they admit them, and somehow like to pretend that people won't automatically put you in a group, or people are wrong for putting you in a group. In reality, it is a completely fair to get put in a group the moment you realize this person doesn't have the same views as you, especially when you're not considerate of that other group as much as people like to claim they are. And I know that might sound a bit like, whoa, whoa, come on, chill out. You're just spitting out a bunch of nonsense. No, there's no nonsense here. It basically means you have to really feel that I'm not trying to attack you for you to be able to listen to me. That is the truth. And you have to feel like you're that I am somebody that no matter what, you're still able to listen to, even if you end up seeing something that indicates my viewpoints not aligning. And that's going to be incredibly important if we want to really change how things are right now. Because truthfully, and this is what I wanted to get into my next topic, and that's the state of where I live. I live in the United States of America. That's where I live. So I understand there's going to be a lot of people probably watching me from other places, listening to this podcast from all across the world, and I hope that's the case. Heck, I hope you're watching this on TikTok because heck, I want this to be everywhere. But the truth of the matter is, I do care about my country. I do care about the people in my country. And no, I don't want to hate half the country. I don't want to only care for half the country. And no, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that there isn't any problems because there are. I also don't want to instill any fear or any lack of hope for changing things around. But I do gotta say, this is gonna start with a change in mentality and a change of how you start to see the information you're getting. Because honestly, we we have too many hypocrites. We have too many hypocrites here, and we see them mostly in terms of politicians, but we also see it within parties, and that's the truth of the matter. And we will get to it. We will analyze and understand everything. We don't need to speak on direct facts. We don't need to bring out bills and the year they came from. We don't need to do any of that. We might for the sake of certain topics, but that's not going to be the point because, to be honest, most people don't care about facts anyway. They just don't. Most people tend to get swayed with talking points, very broad talking points. This person's gonna decrease prices. This person's gonna help this groups. Those type of things. Those are what changes people's mind, and that is what we're gonna be trying to understand better. why we're so easily manipulated. And if we get to the root cause of that, that would be great, but we don't need to. We just got to understand it a little bit if we want to change. And here's the thing. I'm, in a way, I won't get into it, but I'm very, very disappointed in a lot of people in my community, me as a Latino man. And if you are not a Latino man, if you're not living in the United States, I will try to go over this as quick as possible, move on to some better, more general stuff that could be applied to anybody. But the truth of the matter is, the Latino voter has has done something. They have, for the most part, disassociated themselves with their culture, and it's pretty obvious because there's a couple of really big points in our culture that I truly, truly love. It's not perfect culture, it just isn't. We need to think more about our strong points, the things that truly make us unique. One of the biggest things is family. Latino culture in general has always been very, very heavily focused on family. That hasn't always helped us as a community because of how much we put our family first. But for the most part, that has always been a big part. But the truth of the matter is, a lot of my community has not held up this point from our culture. They have put themselves and what they think will help the United States in terms of whatever, they have put that ahead of their community, ahead of their family. And for that, I'm very disappointed. And we'll get very much into it, but I have decided that there really needs to be stronger voices representing us. Also want to give a massive, massive applaud to Latina artist Becky G, because I've followed her for a long time on Instagram, and she is doing very good work, especially for our community. She has been truly, truly spreading the word about the problem that's going on in LA with the fires, but how it relates to the Latino community. Because obviously California is, there is a lot of Latinos there. And I always appreciate a big artist not just talking about the importance of spreading awareness, or just not just a share, which I always like to see, but it's just going a step further. She has been going out to the streets. She's been going the extra step. And to be honest, it really shows how much she truly cares for her community. And I like to see it. I really do. I like to see it. Politics aside, I feel like I don't want my podcast to be taken over by that. Will in the future, will I make one episode on pure politics or more? It is possible. There is enough. There is enough to talk about. When it comes to that, that could fill up several podcast episodes, but we're not doing that. Instead, I really want to also state how much of a voice I want to be for young people in general. I truly do believe that my experiences, my failures in life could really make a difference for people. Not everybody needs to hear about my experiences and and to better themselves, right? And not everybody will get that and take something inspiring from it or whatever, but the truth of the matter is, a lot of us could truly help, could truly be making a difference for younger folks if we just shared of our experiences. Truthfully, as a whole, humankind only really evolves by other humans showing us or helping us avoid the mistakes that were made before. I truly believe that. So I will definitely try to constantly be giving advice. And I say this, there has been a wave. There has been a massive wave of people feeling very much unappreciated, people feeling like other groups that are not them or not getting the attention that they deserve. And let me tell you, the number one thing you should take away from this is the world is not fair. It's not fair. It's not fair for you because perhaps you do see other people getting this sort of attention that you might be craving or wanting. But the truth of the matter is, the reason they're getting attention for the most part also stems from the world being unfair. And if you just take this moment and understand and realize that perhaps there's more to why they're getting attention, then maybe you could agree with it and try to avoid the idea of letting these loud voices make you think that a majority of people believe what they're saying. Because more often than not, the louder the voice, the less they really represent the majority. And it's always the truth. More people who are happy or more people that are satisfied with watching videos tend to not comment. The negative thoughts pushes people to comment a lot more. So often the ratio it will be for every one person that is unsatisfied or even hates the video, you have 1,000 people. Well, the ratio is probably not 1,000 people, but you probably have like 100 people that like the video that you won't see because liking the video isn't enough motivation to comment. But they did. They did like it. Now we're gonna get to the final part of the first episode of the podcast, and I truly hope this hasn't been information overload for you. Which is why I'm going to end it off on a really fun note. And I consider this fun because I really like these juicy stories. They're entertaining as heck. And we're going to get into it. And hopefully this gets clipped out of context, gets posted everywhere, because really it'll just drive attention to the podcast, which I will appreciate because this is the first episode and I've already had so much fun with it. I truly have. And I don't want the idea that this podcast is going to be pure, nonsensical seriousness because that's not who I am. I will be a lot more serious when it comes to serious topics. I find it very hard to throw in jokes for serious topics. I find it pretty hard or strange to make jokes to nobody in the room because it's very weird. It's like you're performing stand-up comedy to the wall. It's very strange, it's very weird, and I'm not used to it. So, I tend not to throw as much humor in these type of things. Oddly enough, I always feel like I'm a lot funnier in person where there is somebody to work off of. And that's probably just me, but I like joking around with people and I like to think that I'm funny, but I need somebody to make laugh. Video when I'm recording to when I'm talking to you listening right now, understand that even though I'm talking to you. Trust me, I am. At the same time, I'm talking to nobody here. I'm talking to myself, and I just the banter, the joking. It doesn't come naturally to me in this type of format, but maybe after some time it will. Is possible. So yeah, to my favorite topic because this is probably gonna be my favorite part for now of these. All right. So here is the title for this one. It is Am I the asshole for confronting my brother about prioritizing his sister-in-law over me for housing? Okay. So it's somebody who had a confrontation with their brother, and I was wondering if that was a bad thing because it's about prioritizing his sister-in-law, or it's about the brother prioritizing his girlfriend essentially, or his wife, because his sister-in-law, his wife, over that person. Okay, let's just continue on. I'm a 22-year-old female with a 3-year-old son, currently living with my mom, 63 years old. I've lived with her all my life, and I'm working on getting on my feet. My brother, 28 years old, and his fiance, 27-year-old female, recently bought a home. Though they're in a tight spot financially because his fiance just graduated from nursing school and hasn't worked in years. Okay, so we are clearly understanding the situation pretty easily. And it looks like this daughter lives with her mom. She has a brother who, I'm assuming as of right now, lives with his fiance in the recently bought home. Cool. Last year, my brother and his fiance had a conversation with our mom about how I needed to become more independent. They mentioned that my son and I take up a lot of space at my mom's house when they visit, which forces my sister in law to stay elsewhere. Her dad lives nearby. Wow. So this brother is essentially complaining to his mom about the fact that it seems a little claustrophobic, perhaps, or a little tight in her house. And he is saying it's because the daughter lives there with her son. And he seems to be implying, or he did directly say this, but says that perhaps she needs to move out, become independent, not take up space, because it's causing an inconvenience to his fiancée, supposedly. Alright, okay. These visits happen occasionally, not every weekend, since they lived an hour away for the past 5 years. My other sibling also lives at home. Oh, so now we're getting introduced to another sibling who apparently has been living with the mom and the daughter and the daughter's son, but we're barely getting told about this other sibling. But I feel like I've been singled out as the one who needs to move because I have a child. While my mom hasn't pressured me, they've definitely been influencing her opinion. Okay, we're getting the bigger picture here now. It's all coming together now. I feel it, I'm seeing it, I think I understand. So, yeah, it's 100% what looks to be happening. She, because she has a son, is probably getting singled out because of that. But on the other hand, if she does have a son, I mean, she would be taking up more space, so that is accurate. Whether it's worth complaining about, let's continue to read. A while back, my brother and his fiance told me they were considering letting me and my son live in their basement for a year while I worked on getting back on my feet. Wow, okay. So within that year, current day, possibly even. Wow, okay, but it only says that they were considering letting them live with them. So, man, maybe it won't happen. We're just gonna have to keep reading on. We talked about it. And they said they'd charge me for food and utilities after a few months, which I agreed to. While we didn't set a firm date, my sister in law suggested springtime might work, so it looks like she accepted this offer to live in their basement. And of course, it's her brother. It's her brother that's suggesting this, which it from all indications, it doesn't really seem like they have a strenuous relationship. So I would trust, or I could see her trusting him. Why wouldn't she trust him? It kind of seems like a very kind thing. She is trying to get back on her feet. Her brother's offering a way for her to be able to do that, having a place to live, and it seems to come from a place of understanding. Of course, this is clearly not the end. We're going to continue reading on now. Last week, I called my brother to confirm when we could make this move, but he told me that the plan was on hold. Apparently, his fiance's sister, 25 female, is moving in until December because she's in medical residency nearby and is having issues with her current roommates. They decided to let her move into the basement instead of me and my son, saying, given the situation, she was a better fit for right now. Okay, if she were to finish this whole story now, I have some ideas, and I think I would know, and I think I would give her an answer right now, actually, whether she's the a-hole or not. And apparently it took her calling him to get this, but looks like her brother has canceled or temporarily put it, as what she said, put it on hold. And it seems like they're gonna instead let the fiance's sister move in. And if her, if what she said, her brother said, is accurate, then this brother kind of made it seem like, well, they found someone better that fits the mold better. See, right from the bat, I don't really like the way the brother worded this, assuming it's exactly what he said. But we're not done here. Let's go on. We're close, though. We're about to come up with a solution. Not a solution, an answer to her question. When I confronted my brother about how unfair this was, he and his fiancée stood by their decision. He didn't clarify whether her sister would be paying rent or living there for free, but it felt like a slap in the face since we had already been discussing this arrangement for months. I can't help but feel like this was a power play by my sister in law to prioritize her family over me and my son. I confronted my brother pretty hard, and now we're not speaking. My mom is also upset about the situation. Am I the asshole? Okay. So this is all gonna be dependent on whether it her idea of that being an unfair thing, how much of that is reasonable, I guess. And the truth of the matter is, I could only base this off exactly what she has said and the information that she has provided to us. And because of that, I'm actually leaning towards her being in the wrong. I wouldn't call her an asshole though. I wouldn't call her an asshole, but I wouldn't call the brother an asshole either. It's one of those things where I actually don't think either person is the asshole. But because she said, am I the asshole? And usually you have to say, you actually don't, but I'm going to say it's either yes or no. And in this situation, it's a yes. And here is the reasoning why. If you don't agree with me, I feel like this could go either way for like whether you think she's in the wrong or not. You might have a lot of sympathy, you might have a lot of empathy towards her situation. The fact that she's a single mom, based on what she said, it kind of seems like she's a single mom. With her son, it seems like she hasn't been working, and it seems like perhaps before she was independent, but she's currently not. Because of that, I mean, it's dependent on that, and the fact that if you see the previous suggestion that they had been arranging this as like a like a for sure agreement, then I could understand why you may want to think that the brother's in as an asshole for breaking this arrangement. But to be honest, there is no contractual obligation for him to pull this through. And though this is all stemming from the fact that she's was planning on moving out of her mom's place based on literally based on just the fact that her brother had a couple of complaints about there not being enough space, in which case that is not a good enough reason to move out. I would say it. So that itself is it's already not a very good reason to move out. But the truth of the matter is, the brother did make a mistake in wording it like that, but I can understand. It is totally makes sense. The sister, the person writing this, has a living situation going on that works. The brother is literally the only reason the living situation has any sort of hiccups, and it didn't even seem that serious, to be honest. The sister of the fiance, on the other hand, I can't say whether it's an extreme situation, but she's having actual issues with her current living situation. And she is the sister as well of one of the owners of the house. So when they had to decide on whether to let one sister versus the other sister, the truth of the matter, it would be living situations and how much of a necessity it was to move from what where they were before. And because this didn't seem like yeah, no, her brother had definitely said that she was gonna be moving, and we had set a date, and then last minute he backed out. No, they hadn't even figured out a move-in date, which could also mean she might have not been very prepped to move out anyway. Of course, now I'm kind of adding my own extra information, but that's honestly what I truly feel is going on here. So I'm sorry, but yep, you are in fact the asshole. That will finish it here in the very first episode. This episode, I'm gonna assume this episode is probably about 30 minutes long. 30 to 40 minutes. I'm gonna guess right now that that's probably the length. And yes, this episode didn't. I would say this was a crucial episode. This was episode 1. It, but at the same time, understand that we're not gonna have like a very much substance filled episode. We weren't gonna have all the juiciness of stories or anything like that because it's episode 1. We're just chilling. We're just talking about what the podcast even is. There's going to be a lot of viewers who did not know what Chisme even was. There's going to be a lot of viewers who are Hispanic, Latino, who might fight me on my definition. But to be honest, I don't care. It's just the title. Let's just be honest here. The only way this should be taken, or the title should be taken serious, would be if there is a case to be said that it could be a very toxic, malicious word, but it isn't by my definition, and I don't know anybody who thinks it is. But yeah, no, I appreciate it though. If you have been listening here on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I believe this is on Apple Podcasts. Then I definitely appreciate it, and make sure you follow the podcast so you constantly watch these episodes. The length of these episodes are probably going to be longer than what this one is because we'll actually be getting into certain topics which could honestly have 30, 40 minutes talking points anyway. So that's probably going to be the length of the upcoming episodes. If you're watching this video podcast on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to this new channel because this is this is as new and as fresh as can be. And and if you are watching this again on YouTube, you'll probably also have some links in the description to a gaming channel that I have and maybe to a vlogging channel, but that's dependent. That vlogging channel hasn't it's not there's nothing there. So but yeah, if you enjoy gaming, you can go ahead and and you are able to comment on the on this through YouTube. So you want to submit any stories, anything to talk about, or have any viewpoints that you would like to hear my opinions on and have like a nice fresh take on it based on my experiences, then awesome. And otherwise, this has been the very first episode of Chisme and Shadows.